The BarryFastCars. Um, I'm back. I say that every friggin' time, but we're gonna really step it up here over the summer and see what I can pull off on this here YouTube. And we're gonna talk race cars. We're gonna talk. Jesus, they can't get their branding straight, but it looks like Well, for now, we'll just say IMSA GTP. These cars will also race in WEC. But here it is, guys. The BMW M V8 Hybrid is what they're calling it right now. It's a pretty cool race car. I mean, I have to say, this is here as we see it. This isn't a real car. It's not a rendering. It's just a model. So there's no engine in this. There's no anything in this. It's just a mock-up like you would see when you see a Formula One car at an event. It's just a shell. But that's okay. It's obviously just showing the design in some form or another. It's a pretty cool wrap. If you look at the details from certain angles, you're going to see essentially all the main race cars motifed. So over here, you could probably see my cursor. You can see the grills of what was the M8 GTE, the previous endurance race car, obviously replaced by the current M4. That's doing quite well across the world. The new GT3 M4 GT3, which actually might be getting an update pretty soon here. Surprisingly, since the CSL just dropped, I suspect the race car will be updated with some CSL, either branding or some styling cues from the CSL. But that's a whole different story. So we'll talk about that at a different time. Actually, it will coincide with this a little bit. So yeah, it says here on the side, M Hybrid V8. We know the whole class of, whether it's LMH or GTP. I personally like the GTP branding because the racing category is Grand Touring racing. So GT, and then it's a prototype of a GT car. So I think it makes the most sense. I kind of wish they would adopt it in Europe, but they're going with LMH, which is fine. Someday we'll get some consistent branding across the world of endurance motorsport. But for now, this is actually a pretty good in-between. So yeah, we have a couple angles here. I have a nice little gallery, and we can just talk about it. It's a really cool car. There's a couple things that surprise me when it comes to branding. Granted, this car is being released this year. 2022 is the 50th anniversary of BMW M. They're making a pretty big splash about it, and we'll talk about certain details that correlate to that. But what's great about this new category, of course, is the slight correlation to road car design integrated into these prototypes. So they're claiming, which is of course hard to see in this photograph, and of course with this camouflage livery. And of course, keep in mind, this is just BMW's livery for this. I mean, you could almost call it a concept car, but it is the aesthetic that the race car will have. But you have these kidneys here, so you have intakes in the front, highly functional. There's actually an opening under the intake as well. So what I suspect is that's going to be specifically for aero. That will be shooting under the car and be going straight into the underbody and diffuser and powering the diffuser, if you will. And then we have these giant intakes, of course, for what will be the radiators for the engine itself. So engine coolant and of course intercoolers. Those will be running in there as well. And of course a little bit of intake for the driver in the cockpit, which is a very cool cockpit. I feel like this is the narrowest cockpit that I've seen in a prototype car. But let's keep moving forward here. We have what they're calling a Hofmeister King. What's hard to see here, of course, since this is just a model, these aren't real windows, so it's hard to differentiate exactly where the window is. You can see the door is around here. You can probably barely see my cursor. I should make my cursor larger for these videos, these screen grab videos. I love that they use open wheels. Formula One should be using open wheels. These wheel covers that F1 is using right now is a tragedy, but that is for another video. We'll move forward a little bit. I've seen some people complain that these shots don't show too much. That's kind of the point. It's, you know, just to give us, it's an unveiling of the product. And I do think it's one of the better looking cars. I think the Peugeot is the best looking car so far in this general category. The Peugeot will not be racing in America because Peugeot is not in America. So there would be really no point. But they will be racing against each other in Europe. This gives a better representation of what we're seeing with the grills. The headlights built into the front, you know, I guess you'd call them fenders. Those are all headlights. There's some serious diodes going on here. So, I mean, you're looking at something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 30 diodes in the bottom per, and then something like 7 up here next to what we'd call the DRLs, or the light signatures. We have brake cooling intakes here on the either side. Of course, the car's livery is asymmetrical, so it's a little hard to see, but we can differentiate a lot. I like how low the nose is. We're going to have good visibility. That was always an issue. Remember some of you guys might remember when the Audis and I guess Peugeot and who else was racing back then. It was really only Audi and Peugeot for like the early 2000s, early 2010s, when they first brought out the closed cockpit cars. They're having serious trouble seeing because the fenders were too tall. Looks like we'll have a better visibility for the driver in this generation of car. Some shadow pictures, useless. Let's see here. So we could talk powertrain. It's obviously a V8. I suspect this is a derivative of the 4.4 liter that is in all V8 powered M cars. So that should include a hot V, which, you know, perhaps isn't a terrible thing getting it in a race car. It's been, they've certainly had their issues in the road cars, certainly more in the early generations. The hot V is a hot topic when it comes to engine design, especially in a 90-degree V8. A lot of these new 6-cylinders, like the McLaren Artura and the Ferrari 296, they're using a wide-angle V6. So there's a lot more space to do inboard turbochargers. And when we say inboard, it means the heads are flipped around, obviously 180 degrees, and so the intakes are on the outside of the V, which makes a lot of sense in a mid-engine car. And the turbochargers are in the V, so we're talking like inches or, you know, a couple hundred millimeters from exhaust outlet into the into the turbine. So very short exhaust track into the turbine, obviously leading to great initial response. I am personally quite bummed that it's using a V8. I feel like we are past needing a V8. Now, I am not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination. BMW knows what they're doing. I'm just a little sad being a huge fan of an inline-six, also a huge fan of BMW's current inline-six offering. So we have the B58, and we just had an update to the B58 that's releasing in the new X7 and new 7 Series. It'll, of course, trickle down into almost all the other cars. It's such a good motor. And the S58, you know, the twin-turbo variant of said motor is fantastic. And then the racing engine is called the P58, and it's just a spectacular motor. It's very detuned in its application in the M4 GT3. So when I was at Laguna Seca for the IMSA race, I was talking to a few of the teams, and I was trying to get information for this. I was like, is it going to use the P58? Because there's a handful of, like Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, RLL. They're going to be racing this in IMSA next year. And I was trying to get it out of them. What engine does it use? What engine does it use? Does it use the P58? And of course, they wouldn't tell me. They were being tight-lipped. So, and they had already seen this car. They knew, what was that, 2 months ago, that they'd already seen the car because they're buying it. This is going to be a probably $700,000 race car and a lot more to run it. Real quick, this is a cool angle. You get to see the laser diode taillights, they're not going to show you the back of the car. One, because it's not complete, so really no point. But two, they also wouldn't want to show any design detail at the rear, because that is where a massive amount of performance comes from in these race cars, is of course the rear end / diffuser area. Just like Peugeot didn't show much when they unveiled their concept for their race car. I do also wish we didn't have the shark fin, or whatever the hell you want to call it. I think the cars would look far more aesthetic without them. We already have these boxy rear wings. Why do we need to have a box on the back? They say, oh, it's for stability. It could certainly be significantly reduced in size and still add stability. But these cars produce thousands of pounds of downforce. How much stability do we really need laterally? But here's an angle of the front. You can see here in the livery, that might be an M1 front grille. It's hard to say. They're all kind of cartoonish. But there's the grille. And here's the 50th anniversary M logo. I'm sure you guys all know about this. The 50-yaw BMW M. It's interesting. They're showing this in 2022. It doesn't start racing till Daytona, so 2023. And that would essentially be out of the 50-year anniversary. So I don't know if the race cars will actually have that roundel, but it's possible. I would also say that this front splitter is going to be very different. This is a mock front splitter. They're not going to show you any legitimate. It's just like an F1, like what Red Bull did when they showed their livery. This is just a general shape for the car. So keep that in mind, guys and girls. They claimed in the press release that these mirrors hearken to M mirrors. That is a joke. Why the race cars, especially prototypes, are using mirrors is beyond me. The guy has to look through a window. The A-pillars on a prototype car are enormous. I'm sure he sees the mirror, but they should just have screens on the interior. It's so dumb. They have screens on the interior. They already do. They have the rear view mirror is a screen above the driver, at least in all prototypes I've seen. And they should just have screens on either side of the steering wheel for the mirrors. Like, we got to start somewhere. Why aren't race cars doing it first? But yeah, this is not an M styling detail like they are claiming. That is just ugly. But you do you, BMW. You're not too shy from being ugly. See, I like this. This is an extractor from the fender. They are mandated to have open top fenders so we don't get a pressure stuck in the wheel well, which can create lift and can create a car to flip in the wrong situation. So that's mandated in this generation of car. I would love to see the mirrors integrated into this fender. But again, I would like to see no mirrors more than that. I did jump around. Again, I really wish this used the M4 engine. The GT3 car, I do believe I've heard that it's regulated to 7,000 RPM maximum revving. So of course it's generally a torque monster because of the twin turbos. So it doesn't need to rev very high, but this car would not have had rev RPM limits. So they could have, that would have been another way that they could have extracted more power. But they don't really need to worry about that. They can up the boost. The engine is so stout. But BMW thinks that developing a V8 race engine was the better call. It seems like a waste of money to me, but I don't have the money that BMW has. And they've been doing rather well through this shitty recession we've been dealing with. But I'm not sure what else I want to mention on this. I am very, very happy they are racing. I am a huge IMSA fan. There was a pretty cool race at Detroit this last weekend. Sebastian Bourdais essentially dominated the race. He's just so good. I'm kind of bummed he's not still in IndyCar, but fun fact, at the Detroit Grand Prix and the IMSA race, there was only a 5-second, I would say, average lap time difference between the IMSA DPI cars, the Cadillacs and the Acura, and the Indy cars. I would say a factor in that is the tire size, they're I believe certainly the front tires are larger than IndyCar front tires. The contact patch on a DPI car is, I can't give you a percentage, but certainly larger than Indy cars. They only use 15-inch wheels in IndyCar, so the longitudinal contact patch would be slightly smaller. Even though the diameter wouldn't be drastically different because the sidewall would, of course, be larger, the overall diameter would be fairly similar, between, just like what F1 did. They went from 13 to 18, but the diameter only changed by maybe like 20 or 30 mil. And then they put those hideous wheel covers on. It's just tragic. But yeah, here's the new IMSA V8 from BMW M. So they're back to, I guess you could say, top level. It's hard to say top level because really LMH is top level because they are allowed to use an in-house proprietary chassis. Whereas IMSA, you have to choose from one of 4 chassis manufacturers. Let me check who they use. I didn't even look it up. It'll say right here. IMSA Hybrid V8. Then, it makes it look like a road car, which is bullshit. Developed with the help of Dallara. Well, you really can't go wrong. And the truth is, even if they were allowed to use an in-house proprietary chassis, they would likely have used Dallara. If you were allowed to do both, they would have gone with Dallara anyway. They have all the manufacturing capabilities for carbon fiber chassis, and they're just an amazing partner to have. I mean, it's definitely who I would go with. Although I'm American, so maybe Multimatic would be a cooler option since they're just right above the border in Canada, a North American company. Maybe I would want to, promote American or North American production, but Dallara is so cool. And I mean, they make the Haas F1 chassis. We know they're the real deal. And they've been doing it for generations. So, of course, carscoops.com, not affiliated, but they are the best website when it comes to galleries. I do appreciate them. So any questions, throw them in the comments. I don't have all the answers. Of course, this is just an initial reaction to the new BMW M Hybrid V8. I'll just throw out what I suspect the specs are. Again, I think this would be a derivative of the 4.4. We know the Porsche that's going to be unveiled here, probably in the coming weeks, and I'll do a video on that. They're using a 4-liter twin turbo, likely a derivative of their, what would it be, the Panamera V8 or the Cayenne V8. Of course, they would have dry sump to mount the engine extremely low. They're going to use, of course, sequential transmissions. I hope these guys are using a 7-speed, like I'm fairly certain Toyota uses a 7-speed sequential as of now. And most likely they're going to be using the electric motors, the MGU, for reverse. I could be wrong, but I would be surprised if they I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have a reverse gear within the sequential transmission and just use the electric motor to reverse. A real quick big difference that I only found out today. I thought this next generation of prototypes, whether IMSA or WEC, was going to be rear-wheel drive, but apparently the hybrid unit on the IMSA car or the WEC cars can be all-wheel drive, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. I just kind of like the idea of race cars being rear-wheel drive. Yeah, call me old-fashioned, but here we go. This is kind of the beginning of the next gen of race cars. So it's fun to see. Again, just a concept car, just a livery launch, just a shell. We don't even have a windshield wiper on this. I will mention again, I do think this is one of the narrowest canopies I've seen in a long time. I mean, this is what we could really see implemented in Formula One in 2026. And I cannot stress enough that is absolutely vital. The aero screen does work quite well. I mean, we've seen lots of success with the aero screen in the IndyCar series. But I personally believe a full canopy is the only way forward. If it was the only way forward for prototypes, there's no excuse for single seaters not to be fully canopy. They could make it a little bit wider because it would be a lower car, slightly lower car in F1. I love the box roof snorkel intake. I think that's just a great look. I think it would be better than what F1 uses now. I think it would be kind of futuristic. And with open wheels and a wing and this kind of nicely integrated into a narrow chassis, it looks so good in a single-seater race car. And it would be safer. They would have to implement air conditioning. They would have to. You could not rely on passive cooling in any of these. They have to use air conditioning. And leave it up to the manufacturers to make a quality, race-ready, highly efficient air conditioning system. Come on. It can be a combination of driver cooling and cabin cooling, but it's a necessity. Like, driver safety is obviously paramount, and that would be a factor, is keeping them at a civilized temperature. But that's all I got, guys. Again, let me know what you think. If more information comes out, I'll certainly follow up and let you guys know what I think. But yeah, I'm definitely back to analyze race cars, races. I'm going to try to build this channel so that I can live stream during races. There's these IndyCar races have been so good recently, and I pinch myself when I'm watching them because they're just so high quality. It's IndyCar is honestly the best series in the world right now. But these prototypes and the endurance racing is quite interesting as well. But I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. If you got any questions, like I said, leave it in the comments. And yeah, let's talk soon. Peace.